I'm Susan, 36 female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood that always felt like a movie set, with perfectly manicured lawns and neighbors who waved every morning. I'm a corporate lawyer, a job that's as demanding as it is rewarding, and until recently, I shared my life with my husband, Mark, and our wonderful 7-year-old daughter, Lily. I thought I was building a fortress of a life for my daughter, brick by brick, with every long hour I worked. It turns out, I was just building a taller tower for my in-laws to throw stones from. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Life before it all fell apart was a carefully constructed balancing act. My days were a whirlwind of legal briefs, client meetings, and courtroom preparations. As a senior associate at a top law firm, the pressure was immense, but so were the rewards. I was good at my job, respected by my peers, and on a clear track to making partner. Every late night at the office, every weekend spent reviewing contracts, was, in my mind, a direct investment in Lily's future. It meant she would have the best schools, the most enriching hobbies, and a safety net so strong she'd never have to worry about falling. Mark, my husband, was a real estate agent. His career was more of a roller coaster, with soaring highs during a seller's market and terrifying lows when things cooled down. For the past year, it had been mostly lows. I never saw this as a problem. We were a team, and my stable, high income was the bedrock we built our family on. It paid the mortgage on our beautiful 4-bedroom house, funded our vacations, and kept our lives comfortable and predictable. I thought he was grateful. I thought we were in this together. My mother-in-law, Mildred, was a constant presence in our lives. A retired nurse, she carried herself with an air of quiet authority, as if her medical background gave her an unassailable expertise on everything, especially child-rearing. She lived just 15 minutes away and had been our primary source of childcare since Lily was born. At first, it seemed like the perfect arrangement. "Who better to trust than family?" Mark would say, and I agreed. Mildred was doting, always arriving with homemade cookies or a new dress for Lily. She'd handle school pickups on the days my meetings ran late and would often stay to make dinner, clucking her tongue softly and saying, "You work too hard, dear. Let me take care of this." I saw it as kindness, a loving grandmother stepping in to help her overworked daughter-in-law. I was blind to the fact that every helpful gesture was a carefully placed stone, building a wall between my daughter and me. The signs were there, but they were subtle, like a shift in the wind before a storm. Little comments disguised as concern. "Oh, Lily missed you at her school play today," she'd say, her voice dripping with sympathy. "But don't you worry, Grandma was there to cheer extra loud for her." She never mentioned that I had told her weeks in advance that I had a non-negotiable court appearance that day, or that I had spent the entire night before helping Lily practice her single line until it was perfect. Mark was the bridge between his mother and me, and I slowly began to realize it was a bridge he only allowed traffic to cross in one direction. He'd defend his mother's every action. If I expressed frustration about her undermining my rules, like giving Lily sugary snacks right before dinner after I'd explicitly said no, he'd just laugh it off. "That's just what grandmas do, Susan. She's just spoiling her. It's not a big deal." His responses were always designed to make me feel like I was the one overreacting, the one who was too rigid, too stressed out from work. "You need to relax," was his favorite refrain. Mom's got it under control. He saw her as a support system, a free and convenient one that allowed him to focus on his struggling business without having to pick up the slack at home. He didn't see her as a threat because her old-fashioned views mirrored his own quiet resentments. I was the breadwinner, and while he enjoyed the lifestyle my salary afforded, his pride was silently being eroded with every commission he failed to close. Mildred's narrative, that I was an absent, career-obsessed mother, was a convenient balm for his own feelings of inadequacy. If I was the bad guy, then he and his mother were the heroes, swooping in to save Lily from her neglectful mother. The change in Lily was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. She was a bright, bubbly child, full of laughter and endless questions. My bond with her had always been my anchor. No matter how grueling my day was, the moment I walked through the door and she'd scream, "Mommy," and run into my arms, everything else would melt away. We had our rituals. Ever. One night, no matter how late I got home, I would sneak into her room to kiss her forehead. On weekends, we had Girls' Day, which could be anything from building elaborate pillow forts in the living room to having tea parties with her stuffed animals. These were sacred times for me, moments I protected fiercely on my calendar. But over a few months, I started to notice a subtle distance. Our weekend plans would sometimes be interrupted by a last-minute invitation from Mildred for a special grandma-granddaughter outing. Mark would always encourage it. "Let her go, Susan. You look exhausted. Why don't you use the time to catch up on some rest?" When Lily came back, she'd be quieter, less willing to share details about her day. When I'd ask what she did with Grandma, she'd shrug and say, "Just stuff." The atmosphere in the house began to feel heavy, charged with unspoken things. Mark started spending more evenings at his mother's house with Lily, even when I was home. The excuse was always plausible. Lily wanted to show Grandma her new drawing, or Mom made her famous lasagna and insisted we come over. I was always invited, of course, but it was a hollow invitation. I knew if I went, I'd be met with Mildred's passive-aggressive comments about my work schedule and Mark's placating smiles. It was easier to stay home, to catch up on the work I'd brought with me, and tell myself that this was just a phase. I was providing for my family. That's what a good mother, a good wife, did. I was fulfilling my role, just in a different way than Mildred had fulfilled hers. The world had changed, after all. Women could be mothers and have powerful careers. We could have it all. But in my own home, a quiet, insidious campaign was being waged to prove that having it all actually meant I was failing at the one job that mattered most. The foundation of my world was cracking, hairline fractures spreading under the surface, and I was too busy, too tired, and too trusting to notice until the whole thing threatened to collapse on top of me. The unraveling didn't happen with a loud snap. It happened in whispers, in sideways glances, and in the slow, heartbreaking erosion of a single, precious word. Mom. The day it happened was a Tuesday. I remember the quality of the light, that golden late afternoon sun slanting through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was one of those rare, miraculous days where I'd managed to clear my schedule and leave the office by 4 o'clock. I was practically giddy with the prospect of surprising Lily. I'd stopped at her favorite bakery and bought a cupcake with an absurd amount of pink frosting and rainbow sprinkles, the kind she adored. I walked in the door, my heart feeling lighter than it had in months, and called out, "I'm home, sweetie. I've got a surprise for you." I found her in the living room, sitting on the floor with her grandmother. They were playing with dolls. Mildred was there, of course. She seemed to be there more often than not lately, a permanent fixture in my home. She looked up when I entered, her smile tight and thin, a barely there acknowledgement of my presence. "Oh, Susan." "You're home early," she said, her tone making it sound less like a pleasant observation and more like an accusation. Lily didn't look up. She continued to methodically brush the hair on a Barbie doll, her small back turned towards me. This was unusual. Normally, my arrival home was the main event of her day. A prickle of unease ran down my spine, but I brushed it aside. She's just focused on her game, I told myself. "Lilybug," I said, my voice bright and cheerful. "Look what Mommy brought you." I held out the small white box from the bakery. She still didn't turn around. My smile started to feel strained. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Mildred finally placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "Lily, dear, Susan is talking to you." The name hit me like a splash of cold water. Susan, not your mother, not Mommy. Susan. It was a deliberate, calculated choice of words, and it was meant for me to hear. My breath hitched. Lily slowly turned her head, her expression unnervingly blank for a 7-year-old. She looked at me, then at the cupcake box, and then back at me. "I don't want it," she said, her voice flat. She turned back to her dolls. The rejection was stunning, a physical blow. It wasn't the petulant "I don't want it" of a child in a bad mood. It was a cold, dismissive statement. The cupcake in my hand suddenly felt ridiculous, a symbol of my naivety. I looked at Mildred, my eyes searching for an explanation. She just gave me that same pitying look, a slight shake of her head that said, "See what you've done?" "She's just tired," Mildred murmured, a perfect portrait of a concerned grandmother. It's been a long day. I knelt down to Lily's level, trying to keep my voice steady. Honey, what's wrong? Did something happen at school? She refused to meet my eyes, she just kept brushing that doll's hair with a fierce, repetitive motion. I reached out to touch her arm and she flinched, pulling away from me as if my hand were hot. The pain of that small movement was indescribable. It was a physical rejection from the person who was the very center of my universe. Lily, please talk to me, I whispered, my throat tightening. I don't want to, she mumbled, her focus still entirely on the doll. That's when I heard it. The final, devastating blow. Can you please leave me alone, Susan? The world stopped. The air left my lungs. She had never, not once in her entire life, called me by my first name. It had always been Mommy or Mama or Mom. To hear my own name from her lips felt like a betrayal so profound it disoriented me. It was alien. Wrong. It was the verbal equivalent of looking at your own child and seeing a stranger. My gaze shot to Mildred. Her face was a mask of serene innocence, but I could see the flicker of triumph in her eyes. She had done this. This was her handiwork. This was a victory she was savoring. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. Mark, I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. He was upstairs in our home office, supposedly prospecting for clients. He came down a moment later, looking annoyed at being disturbed. What's going on? I'm on the phone. Listen to this, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Tell your father what you just called me, I said to Lily. Lily glanced nervously at Mildred, who gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Lily looked back at me, her small face set with a strange kind of defiance. I called you Susan, she said. Mark just blinked, looking from me to Lily and back again. Okay, so, he said with a shrug. What's the big deal? It's your name. I stared at him, dumbfounded. What's the big deal? I repeated, my voice rising. She's 7 years old, Mark. She has never called me Susan in her life. She's calling me by my first name like I'm her babysitter, not her mother. Doesn't that seem odd to you? He sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I were the most irrational person on the planet. Susan, you're overreacting. Kids go through phases. You read about this stuff. It's probably something she picked up at school. She didn't pick this up at school, I shot back, gesturing towards his mother. She picked it up right here, from her. Mildred gasped, placing a hand over her heart in a gesture of pure theatrical shock. Why, Susan, I would never. How could you even suggest such a thing? I love Lily as if she were my own. That's the problem, Mildred, I seethed. You are starting to believe that she is your own. Mark stepped between us. Okay, that's enough, he said, holding his hands up. You're stressed from work. Mom, maybe you should take Lily and go get some ice cream. It was the ultimate dismissal. In one sentence, he had invalidated my feelings, taken his mother's side, and suggested the solution was to remove the child from her actual mother's presence and reward her with a treat from the very person who was causing the problem. Mildred, seeing her victory was complete, smiled sweetly. That's a wonderful idea, son. She stood up, taking Lily's hand. Come on, sweet pea. Let's leave Susan to rest. She seems very tired. Lily went with her without a backward glance. As they walked towards the door, I stood frozen in my own living room, the stupid cupcake still in my hand. They left, and the front door clicked shut, leaving me in a silence that was more deafening than any argument. Mark just shook his head at me. You really need to learn to let things go, he said, before turning and heading back upstairs to his important phone call, leaving me completely and utterly alone with the cold, hard reality that my daughter had just called me by my name, and I was the only one in the house who seemed to think it mattered. The days following the Susan incident were a masterclass in gaslighting. Every time I tried to talk to Mark about it, he would shut me down, accusing me of being paranoid and trying to drive a wedge between him and his mother. She has done nothing but help us, Susan, he'd say, his voice laced with exasperation. She raises our daughter while you're out winning cases. The least you could do is be grateful. The word raises was a deliberate sting, and he knew it. Meanwhile, the behavior from Lily continued, and it was clear it was being coached. She no longer called me Mom at all. It was always Susan. Susan, can you pass the salt? Susan, can you help me with my homework? Each utterance was a small paper cut on my soul. Mildred was always there to reinforce it, her presence a constant, suffocating blanket. She'd praise Lily for her politeness and her grown-up words, shooting me smug little looks over Lily's head. My home no longer felt like my own. It felt like occupied territory, a place where my authority as a mother was being systematically dismantled, and my husband was a willing collaborator. I started to feel like a ghost in my own family, a silent observer watching a play where everyone but me knew their lines. The breaking point, the moment I knew this was far more sinister than just a power play by a jealous mother-in-law, came about 2 weeks later. I had to travel for a deposition, a short overnight trip I couldn't get out of. I hated leaving Lily, but it was a critical part of a multi-million-dollar case I was leading. Before I left, I tucked Lily into bed, read her 3 of her favorite stories, and kissed her goodnight. "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, my love," I whispered, stroking her hair. "Be a good girl for Daddy." She just stared at the ceiling. "Okay, Susan," she replied, her voice small. The name still hurt, but I was trying to follow the advice of a parenting blog I'd read. Don't give the behavior too much attention. I flew out the next morning feeling a familiar ache of guilt, which I tried to push down by focusing on my work. The deposition went well, and I managed to catch an earlier flight home the next day. I was excited to see Lily, hoping a little time apart would have softened her. I walked into the house around 3 p.m., expecting it to be empty. Mark was supposed to pick Lily up from school at 3:15, but as I set my briefcase down in the entryway, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. It was Mark and Mildred, their tones low and conspiratorial. I paused, my hand still on the doorknob, and listened. "She just needs to understand that this is what's best for Lily," Mildred was saying, her voice firm. "Children need stability, they need their mother." "I know, Mom," Mark replied, his voice heavy. "But Susan's not going to see it that way. She's proud of her job." Mildred let out a short, sharp laugh. "Proud of what?" "Proud of abandoning her child every day for a paycheck. A real mother's place is in the home. Her work is her family. You know, my mother never worked a day in her life. She was always there for us with a hot meal on the table. That's what a child remembers, Mark. Not the fancy vacations or the expensive toys. They remember who was there." My blood ran cold. She was actively painting me as a villain, not just to Lily, but to my own husband. She was poisoning him too, feeding his insecurities and reframing my success as a moral failing. "Lily is starting to understand," Mildred continued, her voice dropping even lower. "The other day, she asked me why Susan had to leave all the time. I explained it to her gently. I told her that some mothers have to go away to make money, but that her real mothering comes from the people who are with her every day, nurturing her. People like you and like me, real mothering." The phrase echoed in my head. They were creating a narrative where I was a substitute, a money provider, while Mildred was the nurturer, the de facto mother. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This was calculated. This was brainwashing. I leaned against the wall, trying to control my breathing, when I heard the part that shattered the last vestiges of my denial. "She told me she doesn't feel like Susan is her real mom anymore," Mildred said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "She said Susan feels like a visitor. She even drew a picture at school, a family portrait. It was you, me, and her. Susan wasn't in it." A choked sound escaped my lips, and I quickly covered my mouth. The family portrait. I remembered parent-teacher conferences just a month ago, where Lily's teacher had shown me a whole wall of them. Lily's had been front and center, a crayon drawing of the 3 of us, me, Mark, and her, holding hands under a smiling sun. The idea that she had now drawn one without me, it was a visceral pain, a rejection so total it felt like a part of my body had been amputated. Mark was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "Well, what do you expect? Susan is never here. You and I are the ones raising her day to day. Of course Lily feels that way." There was no defense of me. "No, that's not fair, Mom." Just acceptance. Resignation. He believed it too. He was my husband, and he believed I was a visitor in my own daughter's life. I couldn't listen anymore. I pushed myself off the wall and walked into the kitchen. The sight of them sitting at my kitchen table, drinking tea like 2 generals planning a campaign, sent a surge of white-hot fury through me. They both jumped when they saw me, their faces a mixture of shock and guilt. Mildred recovered first, her features smoothing back into a mask of pleasantness. "Susan, you're back early. What a lovely surprise." I ignored her. I walked straight up to Mark, my eyes boring into his. "Get her out of my house," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Mark blinked, confused. What are you talking about?" I repeated, my voice like ice, "Get your mother out of my house." "Now." Mildred stood up, clutching her purse. "Well, I don't know what you think you heard, but I will not be spoken to this way in my own son's home." "This is my home," I snarled, taking a step towards her. "The home I pay for with the money I earn from abandoning my child. And you are no longer welcome in it." The color drained from her face. Mark grabbed my arm. "Susan, stop it, you're hysterical. Apologize to my mother." I wrenched my arm away from him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Apologize? You sat there and listened to her say that our daughter doesn't see me as her mother anymore, and you agreed with her. You are both poisoning her mind against me, and it ends today." I looked at Mildred, my expression unyielding. "Get out." For the first time, Mildred looked genuinely afraid of me. She scurried out the back door without another word. Mark stared at me, his face a storm of anger and disbelief. "You've lost your mind," he whispered. "No," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I've just found it." The battle lines had been drawn, not just with my mother-in-law, but with my husband. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that this was a war I had to win. For Lily. In the aftermath of the kitchen confrontation, the house became a Cold War zone. Mark and I moved around each other like strangers, the silence thick with unspoken accusations. He was furious, claiming I had unforgivably disrespected his mother, the woman who had sacrificed so much for our family. He refused to see her side of the story as anything other than loving concern. I, in his eyes, was the ungrateful, paranoid career woman who was lashing out because of guilt. He started sleeping in the guest room, a physical manifestation of the chasm that had opened between us. But I didn't care about his anger. The rage and hurt had crystallized into something cold and hard in my chest: resolve. The conversation I had overheard was a gift. It had stripped away all denial and exposed the truth of my situation. I wasn't just fighting a grandmother's overinvolvement. I was fighting a deliberate campaign of parental alienation, and my husband was a co-conspirator. As a lawyer, my instincts took over. A fight without evidence is just an argument. A fight with evidence is a case, and I was going to build a case so airtight that no one could ever accuse me of being hysterical again. My first call was to Sarah. She wasn't just my best friend from law school, she had gone on to become a highly respected child psychologist. I met her at a quiet coffee shop far from our neighborhood, my hands shaking as I recounted everything. The Susan nickname, the overheard conversation, the family portrait without me, Mark's complete betrayal. She listened patiently, her expression growing more concerned with every word. When I finished, she didn't offer empty platitudes. She offered a strategy. "Susan, what you're describing is a classic and very severe case of parental alienation," she said, her voice serious. "Mildred is systematically trying to fracture your bond with Lily, and Mark is enabling it. You were right to be horrified. This is emotional abuse, not just of you, but of your daughter." Hearing her validate my fears was like a dam breaking inside me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. "The most important thing right now," Sarah continued, leaning forward, "is Lily's well-being. But to protect her, you have to protect yourself. You need to document everything, and I mean everything." That meeting with Sarah became my blueprint for survival. I bought a new journal that night, a simple, black, hardcover book, and on the first page, I wrote the date and a detailed account of everything I could remember from the past few months. Every passive-aggressive comment from Mildred, every time Mark dismissed my concerns, every instance of Lily calling me Susan. I started carrying a small digital audio recorder in my pocket. My state had one-party consent laws for recording conversations, a legal loophole I was now grateful for. The thought of secretly recording my own family made me feel sick, but Sarah's words echoed in my mind. This isn't about being sneaky. It's about creating a factual record to protect your child. The first recording I captured was due. Sent 3 days later. Mildred had shown up at the house, using the excuse of dropping off a book for Lily. Mark had let her in despite my explicit demand that she not come over. I came downstairs to find her in the living room with Lily. I stayed silent, standing in the hallway, my finger pressing the record button in my pocket. Did you finish the homework Susan gave you? Mildred asked. Yes, Grandma, Lily replied. Good girl, Mildred said, her voice sickeningly sweet. It's a shame she gives you so much work. When I was a little girl, my mother helped me with my homework every single night. But I suppose some mothers are just too busy with their important jobs. It was textbook manipulation, perfectly phrased to sound innocent to an outsider, but designed to plant a seed of resentment in a child's mind. I had it on tape. I became a meticulous archivist of my own life's destruction. I saved every text message from Mark where he called me crazy or dramatic for questioning his mother. I took a photo of a new drawing Lily brought home from school, a picture of her and Mildred holding hands, with the caption, "My best friend." There was no one else in the picture. I started a private, password-protected folder on my computer, uploading the audio files, the photos, and scan pages from my journal. I wrote down dates, times, and direct quotes. My legal training served me well. I was creating a chain of evidence, a timeline of the psychological warfare being waged in my home. I also took Sarah's advice on how to interact with Lily. She told me not to punish her for calling me Susan, as Lily was a victim in this too. Correct her gently, but consistently, Sarah advised. And spend as much one-on-one time with her as you can, in a neutral environment, away from your husband and his mother. I started picking Lily up from school myself every day, even if it meant working until 2 a.m. to make up the time. I took her to the park, to the library, to museums. During these outings, away from the toxic atmosphere of the house, I would see flickers of my old daughter. She would laugh at my silly jokes, hold my hand, and occasionally, a mom would slip out by accident. When it did, I would just squeeze her hand and say, "I love it when you call me that." One evening, during one of our special outings at an ice cream parlor, Lily said something that both broke my heart and solidified my resolve. We were sitting in a booth, and she was quietly eating her strawberry scoop. "Grandma says that you love your job more than you love me," she said, not looking at me. "She says that's why you're always gone." I put my spoon down, my own ice cream forgotten. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm and gentle, just as Sarah had coached me. "Lily, sweetheart, can you look at me?" She reluctantly lifted her eyes to mine. "That is not true," I said, my voice firm but full of love. "Loving you is the most important thing in my whole life. The only reason I work so hard at my job is because I love you. It's my job to make sure you have a safe house to live in, healthy food to eat, and that you can go to a great school. It's how I take care of you, just like a doctor takes care of sick people. My work is for you. It has always been for you." She looked confused, as if this idea was completely new to her. "But Grandma says real mothers don't work," she whispered. I reached across the table and took her small, sticky hand in mine. "Grandma grew up in a very different time, honey. Today, mothers can be anything they want to be. They can be doctors and teachers and artists and, yes, even lawyers. But no matter what job they do, they are always, always real mothers. And I am your real mother. Forever." She didn't respond, but she didn't pull her hand away either. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The poison had sunk in deep, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to find the antidote. My evidence folder was growing, my resolve was hardening, and my path was becoming clear. This wasn't just about documenting deceit anymore. It was about planning my escape. The evidence was the foundation, but now I had to build the structure of my new life. A life that had no room for Mark or Mildred. My conversations with Sarah had shifted from emotional support to strategic planning. She was adamant about one thing: I needed a lawyer, and not just any lawyer from my firm. I needed a shark, a family law specialist who wouldn't be intimidated by the subtle, insidious nature of emotional abuse. "Judges are used to seeing bruises and broken promises," Sarah warned me. "They are less accustomed to the invisible wounds of parental alienation. You need someone who knows how to make them see it." She gave me a name, Julian Croft. He was legendary in the field, known for his meticulous preparation and his ruthless cross-examinations. I took a personal day from work, telling Mark I had a dental appointment, and met Julian in his downtown office. It was stark and modern, with a view of the city that made my own corner office look like a closet. Julian was in his late 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through me. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid out my black journal, a USB drive with the audio files and photos, and a summary I had typed up. I presented my case as if he were the judge. I spoke for nearly an hour, my voice steady and professional, detailing every incident, every piece of evidence. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, leaning back in his chair. "Well, Ms. Miller," he said finally, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. "Most clients come in here with tears and accusations. You've come in with a prosecutable case." That single sentence was the validation I had been craving for months. He agreed to take me on, and we immediately began to map out the strategy. The goal was clear: sole legal and physical custody of Lily. Julian was blunt. "Your husband's complicity is your greatest weapon. We're not just going after the grandmother. We're going to prove that he actively participated in and facilitated the emotional abuse of his own child." The plan had two phases. Phase 1 was covert preparation. Phase 2 was the execution. For the next month, I lived a double life. By day, I was the distant, overworked wife and mother going through the motions at home. By night, after Mark and Lily were asleep, I was a general preparing for war. On Julian's advice, I quietly opened a new bank account in my name only. I started redirecting a portion of my paycheck into it. I scanned and made digital copies of every important document: Lily's birth certificate, our marriage license, passports, mortgage documents, tax returns for the last 5 years. I compiled a detailed list of all our marital assets, from the house itself to Mark's struggling real estate business, which was technically a shared asset. The hardest part was finding a new place to live. I needed a safe haven, a place where Lily and I could start over. I spent my lunch hours meeting with a rental agent Julian had recommended. I found a perfect 2-bedroom apartment in a secure building in a neighboring school district, one that was even better than our current one. I signed the lease under my name alone, paying the first month's rent and security deposit from my new secret account. The apartment was an empty shell, but to me, it represented a future. It was freedom. While I was building my escape route, the situation at home was deteriorating. Mark, sensing a shift in me he couldn't quite define, became more hostile. He accused me of being cold and distant. "It's like you're not even here anymore," he said one night, standing in the doorway of the guest room where he still slept. "I'm just tired, Mark," I replied, not looking up from my laptop. "It's been a busy month at work." He didn't know that my work was a 50-page declaration I was drafting for Julian, detailing every single one of his and his mother's transgressions. Mildred, emboldened by Mark's support, had become even more brazen. She would call the house and ask to speak to Lily, and if I answered, she would simply say, "Is Lily's father there?" completely ignoring me. She sent packages addressed only to Mark and Lily. She was erasing me from my own family, one small, deliberate act at a time. I continued to record everything. The evidence was now overwhelming. I had audio of Mark telling Lily, "Don't worry, Grandma will be at your school concert. She's the one who's always there for you." I had a recording of Mildred telling Lily that my job was selfish and that I was letting a man's world change me. The day of execution, what Julian called D-Day, was meticulously planned. It was a Friday. Mark had a golf outing with potential clients, an all-day event he'd been looking forward to for weeks. Mildred had her weekly bridge game. It was the perfect window of opportunity. That morning, I went through the motions. I made them both breakfast. I kissed Mark goodbye as he left, golf clubs slung over his shoulder. He looked happy, relieved to be escaping the tension of the house. He had no idea he would never be spending another night there. As soon as his car was out of sight, I called the moving company Julian had arranged, a discreet service that specialized in sensitive situations. Then, I went to Lily's school. I had already filed the necessary paperwork to inform them of a pending custody case, along with a temporary restraining order, drafted by Julian, that named Mildred and provisionally named Mark, preventing them from picking Lily up. I checked her out of class early, telling the office it was a doctor's appointment. In the car, I finally told Lily part of the truth, phrasing it in the simple, gentle way Sarah had advised. "Honey," I said, my heart pounding, "you and I are going to be moving into a new house, just the two of us. We're going to go on an A. D venture and make a new home that's all ours." She looked scared and confused. But what about Daddy and Grandma? Daddy will have his own place and we will see him sometimes, I said carefully. But for a little while, it's going to be just you and me. We're going to make our own rules and have so much fun. It's going to be our special clubhouse. When we got back to the house, the movers were there. They worked with quiet efficiency, packing only my and Lily's belongings. My clothes, her toys, the books we read together, the photos of just the two of us. I walked through the house one last time, a stranger in the life I had built. I left Mark's things untouched. His clothes were still in the closet, his golf trophies on the shelf. The only thing I left for him was on the kitchen table, right where he and his mother had plotted against me. It was a single, thick manila envelope. Inside were the divorce papers and the motion for an emergency custody hearing. On top of the envelope, I placed my wedding ring. By the time Mark got home from his golf game, smelling of sunshine and beer, we would be gone. The life he knew would be over. The war was no longer cold, it had just begun. The days between leaving the house and the emergency custody hearing were a blur of adrenaline and anxiety. Lily and I settled into our new apartment, which I quickly tried to make feel like a home. We bought new bedding in her favorite color, purple, and spent an entire afternoon putting up glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling. She was quiet and withdrawn, clearly confused by the sudden upheaval. She asked about Mark and Mildred constantly, and I answered her questions as honestly and neutrally as I could, always reassuring her that she was loved and safe. Meanwhile, the legal battle exploded. Mark was served the papers at our old house that Friday evening. According to Julian, his initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a torrent of furious, threatening text messages to me, all of which I saved and forwarded to my legal team. He hired a lawyer of his own, and the first shot fired was a motion to have Lily immediately return to the family home, painting me as an unstable, vindictive wife who had kidnapped our child. This was exactly what Julian had predicted. Let him get angry, Julian had said. Let him show the court his true colors. Our emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. I was terrified. Everything, my future with my daughter, my ability to protect her, rested on this one day. The courtroom was cold and impersonal. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Julian, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Mark sat across from us with his lawyer, looking haggard and furious. Mildred was sitting in the gallery directly behind him, her face a mask of sorrowful indignation, a perfect performance for the judge. Mark's lawyer went first, painting a picture of me as a career-obsessed, emotionally volatile woman who had ripped a child away from her loving father and grandmother out of pure spite. He claimed I worked over 80 hours a week and was barely a presence in Lily's life. He portrayed Mark as the primary caregiver and Mildred as a saintly, supportive grandmother. It was a compelling narrative, and I could feel a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. Then it was Julian's turn. He stood up, calm and methodical. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here today not because of a mother's spite, but because of a father's neglect and a grandmother's malicious campaign of psychological abuse against a 7-year-old child." Mark's lawyer immediately objected, calling the accusation scandalous and unfounded. "On the contrary," Julian said smoothly, "I have evidence." That was when the tide began to turn. Julian started not with the recordings, but with the financials. He presented bank statements, my employment contract, and our tax returns, methodically demonstrating that I was the sole financial provider for the family. He showed how my income paid the mortgage, the car payments, the private school tuition, and even the expenses for Mark's failing real estate business. "My client is not career-obsessed, Your Honor," Julian stated. "She is a responsible parent who has been carrying the entire financial burden of this family, allowing her husband the freedom to pursue a less stable career." Next, he addressed the issue of my time. He produced my work calendar, showing that while my hours were long, I had blocked out significant time for Lily, every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment, every weekend. Then he presented cell phone records, showing hundreds of calls and texts from me to the home during the day, checking in on Lily, compared to a handful from Mark. The narrative of the absent mother was beginning to crumble, but the knockout blow was the audio evidence. Julian informed the judge that we had a series of audio recordings made legally under one-party consent. That would illustrate the toxic environment my client had been forced to remove her daughter from. He played the first recording, Mildred's voice, sweet as poison, telling Lily that I was too busy with my important job to help with homework and that real mothers were always at home. The judge's expression, previously neutral, hardened. Mark went pale. Mildred in the gallery looked stunned. Julian played the second clip, the one where Mark told Lily that Grandma was the one who's always there for her. He played the third, where Mildred called my career selfish. With each clip, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew colder. The most damning piece of evidence was the last one Julian presented. It was a recording I had taken just a week before I left. I had put my phone on record in Lily's bedroom while I was downstairs making dinner. Mildred had come over and gone up to help Lily with a school project. On the recording, you could hear Lily's small voice. "I miss Mommy," she said. Mildred's reply was chilling. "Oh, sweetie, I know. But Susan has to make a choice. She can choose her job or she can choose you. It seems like she's already made her decision, hasn't she? But don't you worry. Grandma will never choose a job over you. I'm your real mother now." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. The judge looked at Mildred with undisguised contempt. Mark had his head in his hands. Julian wasn't finished. He called his final witness. Not me, but Sarah. As a qualified child psychologist, she took the stand as an expert witness. She explained the concept of parental alienation in clear, clinical terms. She described the profound and lasting psychological damage it can cause a child: anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and a fractured sense of identity. She didn't mention my case specifically, but simply educated the court on the subject. The implication was clear and devastating. When it was time for the judge to rule, she didn't mince words. She looked directly at Mark. "Mr. Miller, you have not only failed to protect your child from this insidious emotional abuse, but you have actively participated in it. Your behavior, and that of your mother, is reprehensible." She then turned her gaze to Mildred in the gallery. "Ma'am, you are a danger to your granddaughter's well-being. Your attempts to poison this child against her own mother are among the most cruel and selfish acts I have ever seen in this courtroom." She granted me sole legal and physical custody of Lily, effective immediately. Mark was granted supervised visitation twice a month, conditional upon him completing a parenting course and attending therapy. Mildred was issued a permanent restraining order, prohibiting her from coming within 500 feet of me or Lily, or having any contact whatsoever. The gavel came down and it was over. I had won. As we walked out of the courtroom, Mark tried to approach me, his face a mess of tears and desperation. "Susan, please," he begged. "I didn't know. I never meant for." I didn't stop. I walked right past him without a word, my eyes fixed on the doors that led to my new life, a life where my daughter would finally be safe. The courtroom victory felt less like a celebration and more like the end of a long, painful surgery. The cancer had been cut out, but now came the slow, arduous process of healing. The first few weeks were the hardest. Lily was deeply unsettled by the court's decision. For a 7-year-old, the world had been turned upside down. The absence of her father and grandmother, who had been such constant, manipulative presences, left a void. She had nightmares. She would sometimes lash out in anger, crying that she wanted to go home, meaning the old house, the old life. It was during those moments that I was so profoundly grateful for Sarah's guidance. "This is the poison leaving her system," Sarah told me during one of our late-night calls. "She has to grieve the reality she was taught, even if it was a toxic one. All you can do is be a constant, loving, and stable presence. Be the lighthouse in her storm." So that's what I became. I took a 6-week leave of absence from work, something I had never done before. My firm, upon hearing a sanitized version of the events, was incredibly supportive. For the first time, my career took a backseat to my child, not because I was forced to, but because I chose to. That choice, made freely and for the right reasons, was empowering. Our days fell into a new, quiet rhythm. We built a routine that was hours and hours alone. We made pancakes for breakfast every morning. We went for long walks in the park after school. We adopted a rescue kitten, a small orange tabby that Lily named Sunshine, who became a furry little therapist for us both. I enrolled Lily in therapy with a specialist Sarah recommended. Her therapist, Dr. Evans, worked with her to untangle the confusing messages she had been fed. She helped Lily understand that it was okay to love her dad, but that the things Grandma had said were not true and were hurtful. It was a slow process with breakthroughs and setbacks. One afternoon, about a month after the court date, Lily came home with a drawing. My heart seized for a moment, my mind flashing back to the painful image of the family portrait without me. She handed it to me silently. It was a picture of our new apartment. In the picture were two figures, me and her, holding hands. Next to us was a small orange cat. Underneath, she had written in her careful, 7-year-old print, "My home, my mom, my sunshine." I pulled her into a hug, tears streaming down my face. And for the first time in over a year, I felt the tight knot of fear in my chest finally begin to dissolve. Mark followed the court's orders. He attended the parenting classes and went to therapy. His supervised visits with Lily were awkward at first, held at a sterile visitation center. I saw him from a distance during one of the drop-offs. He looked diminished, the arrogant confidence completely gone, replaced by a deep, hollow sadness. I felt a pang of pity, but it was fleeting. He had made his choices. He had stood by and watched as his mother tried to destroy me, and in doing so, nearly destroyed his own child. A few months later, his lawyer reached out to mine to say that Mark had cut off all contact with Mildred. Apparently, after the restraining order was issued, she had doubled down, blaming me for everything and trying to convince Mark to fight the ruling, to lie, to do whatever it took to get Lily back. He had finally seen her for the manipulative person she was. It was too little, too late for us, but I hoped, for Lily's sake, that it was the beginning of genuine change for him. Our divorce was finalized quietly 6 months later. I didn't ask for much. I kept my own income and retirement accounts. He kept his business. We sold the house, our former dream home that now held only bitter memories, and split the proceeds. It was a clean, surgical break. Life for me and Lily blossomed. I eventually returned to work, but with a new perspective. I negotiated for a more flexible schedule, proving that I could be just as effective without being physically present in the office from dawn until dusk. I was still a damn good lawyer, but I was no longer willing to sacrifice my evenings and weekends. Those belonged to Lily. I learned that being a good mother wasn't about being there 24/7. It wasn't about bake sales or homemade dinners every single night. It was about being present when you were present. It was about listening, loving, and providing a foundation of unwavering truth and security. It was about showing your daughter what a strong, capable, and loving woman looked like. A year after we moved into our apartment, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, Lily and I were sitting on our small balcony reading books. She looked up at me, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know," she said, "you have the best job." I smiled, surprised. "Oh yeah, what makes you say that?" "Because," she said, her voice full of conviction, "you help people, and you're really smart. Dr. Evans says it's good that I have a mom who is smart and works hard. She says I can be smart and work hard too." My heart felt so full it might burst. The poison was gone. Mildred had tried to teach her that real mothers don't work. But I had shown her that real mothers are the ones who define their own lives, who love fiercely, and who build their own worlds, brick by loving brick.